Hi, I'm bobbaulch, and today we're going to talk about the last day of jury deliberations for the trial of Michael Lawrence Pousson. We're here in Jefferson County, Texas, and he's accused of basically raping a little girl continually over a period of time, for over a period of 2 years, and the little girl was between 5 and 7 years old, and I'm juror number 8. I'm also the jury foreperson, and we've been tasked over the last couple of days to come to a conclusion, a unanimous verdict, either guilty or not guilty. And so if you haven't seen the rest of these videos, go on ahead and look in the description of this video to see all the other links, and like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. This is the That's Jesus channel, and so what we're going to look at, especially for these videos, is how a Christian is approaching a jury, a time on the jury where they've got to come up with a decision on whether someone is guilty or innocent. And it's been a very difficult case. This was the hardest case I've ever been a juror on, and we're going to go through what happened at jury deliberations today. We started off at the end of yesterday. We were at 9 guilty and 3 not guilty. And so as we got into our deliberations a little bit today, those people who were saying, not guilty, we gave them the opportunity to go on ahead and say, tell us what it is about this case that makes you think it's not guilty. And to make that easier for them, what I did is went ahead and stood up, and we had a white marker board, one of those dry erase boards, and we made a timeline. And it was extremely difficult to make a timeline because neither the prosecuting attorney or the defense attorney really wrote out the timeline. They said very vague questions. Well, I think it was, this time to this time, and I worked between this date and this date, and I think it was about 6 months later. And then we kind of skipped a whole year, and you had to go back to the other testimony to find out what happened that year. It was a very difficult task to make a timeline. But basically, the timeline looked like this. And some of this was guesswork, right? Because things were not crystal clear. So you have 12 grown adults in the jury room, and we're really guessing about the timeline because it just was not crystal clear what the timeline was. So we said that the defendant, Michael Lawrence Pousson, and the mom of the potential victim, they both got divorced in about 2017, and that the defendant and the mom got into a relationship in about March of 2018. Within a couple of months, about August 2018, mom and her daughter, the potential victim in this, the complainant in this case, and her older brother all moved in with the defendant in Orange County, Texas. As soon as they moved in, it wasn't very long, and the defendant's daughter, who was living with him, moved out. So the defendant has 4 kids of his own. And then in November of 2018, that's when the defendant's son was in a room with the complainant. Mom had finished making dinner, and she went to tell everybody, knocked on the door. Doors are usually open and unlocked. Knocked on the door. Nobody answers. Knocking for 2 minutes. Nobody answers, and finally she kicks in the door, and there is the defendant's son sitting on a chair with a blanket on his lap, and the little complainant girl, she is, according to the testimony, just laying on the bed. And so that sparked a whole chain of events. The defendant is called. He's on his way home. The mom wants to blow off the defendant's son's head with a gun. He, says, call the police instead. The police come and they go and talk to the defendant's son. The little girl is taken to one of the local hospitals here in Jefferson County, Texas. Orange, Texas and Jefferson County, Texas touch. And Orange County, Texas doesn't have a real medical center like Jefferson County does here in Beaumont, Texas. And so, if you can call Beaumont, Texas, is 2 hospitals, a medical center, but certainly more than what Orange County has. And so they bring her to Jefferson County, Texas, where she has a SANE exam, SANE, a sexual assault nurse examination. And mom is with the defendant while they take her to the hospital. After the SANE exam, the little girl is taken to a local facility here in Jefferson County, where she's interviewed by a professional interviewer to determine whether or not the Child Protective Services or the district attorney or something like that needs to get involved. And while that has happened, this is in November of 2018. It takes about a month or so later, in December of 2018, that the little girl is interviewed for a second time at that facility here in Jefferson County, Texas. The reasons for that examination, we don't know, but she is examined again. She's questioned again. Open-ended questions are the key on those interviews. And while all this happens, the defendant has had 3 jobs. He's worked for 2 separate companies, and now he's on his 3rd company. And now we move from December of 2018 all the way to the summer of 2019. Summer of 2019, mom moves out with her 2 kids. She moves back to Jefferson County, Texas. And by the time fall of 2019 occurs, the defendant and his house are kind of in turmoil, right? He's going back and forth to another city in Texas. It's about 2 hours away, and a family member is watching all of his kids at home, and but they are back together. Mom moved back to Jefferson County, Texas, but within just a couple of weeks, they're back together. They're having a relationship. Things are going along okay. Sometimes that happens. You live with somebody, you can't live with them. You split up. You're not living with each other. Things are working out. That's just my take on it. They're back together. Winter of 2019, 2020, spring of 2020, summer of 2020. Fall of 2020, all that time, the defendant is going back and forth to another city here in Texas that's 2 hours away. On the weekends, he is coming to spend his weekends, though. He gets the weekends off, and he's at the mom's house in Jefferson County, Texas. Sometimes the mom and the little girl, the complainant, will go to a city kind of in between those two. They'll stay in a hotel while that's happening during the week, and he'll stay in that hotel with them. And so then in November of 2020, something happens. The defendant moves in with mom and her 2 kids in Jefferson County, Texas. That's November of 2020, according to some of the testimony that we had. And we're not sure when exactly it happens, but between November of 2020 and the summer of 2021, the little girl, the complainant, has a cousin whose testimony was that she was touched by the defendant. Now, the testimony of the complainant, the little girl, the mom's little girl, was that while they were in Orange County, the defendant was doing things to her, and that when they went to visit while he was working and doing that 2-hour drive, he would do things to her in his truck while mom was in the hotel. And that when he came to visit on the weekends in Jefferson County, Texas, things would happen as well. But finally, in November 2020, he moves in, right? So he's living with mom. He's living with the little girl. He's living with the mom's another boy who's several years older than the little girl who becomes the complainant. And while they're all living together, the witness, when the little girl got on the witness stand, she said that the defendant was coming in her room and doing things to her. And things come to a head in the summer of 2021. In July or August, he's not sure exactly when, but in July or August, the defendant completely moves out of mom's house. They got in a tussle. He broke his finger. Mom has had a black eye. We're not sure if that happened in this tussle or not. The testimony didn't tell us when that happened. So that was all just a big guess. We don't know when that happened. But we do know this, that mom was providing transportation to the defendant because his truck had broken down. Mom is having him over regularly, even though he's moved out. Mom is wanting him to watch her little daughter, who becomes the complainant, and the defendant says that mom is actually using the little girl to kind of entice him to move back in, not in a sexual way, but because their relationship is so close. It's more of a daughter-daddy relationship with the little girl. Now, that's all the defendant moving out, right? And he's moved out, and within weeks of him moving out, they're sleeping together again and in a relationship again, even though he's moved out. And at this time in August, that the defendant, who was already at the mom's house, has been gone for about 30 minutes. He'd been there earlier. He left. It's been about 30 minutes, and mom is asking the little girl, is it okay if he babysits you? Because I know you're concerned because I have a black eye, but I just want to know if it's okay if the defendant babysits you. And the little girl initially doesn't answer or something, or says no. We don't know exactly what was said. Don't know what the dialogue was. We aren't given that information. But the little girl says that the defendant has been touching her and she is tired of it. Well, mom explodes. Mom blows her top. She takes the little girl, who will eventually become the complainant in this case, drives off to the corner store, drops her off with her friend slash coworker slash employee. We're not exactly sure. At the corner store, she called the police. Mom has called the police. Mom also calls her mom, grandma, and mom is on her way to a city that kind of is kind of like the town between Orange County, Texas, and Jefferson County, Texas. And she's headed over the bridge to go and kill the defendant. She's going to run him over. That's her testimony. She has fully convinced herself she's going to kill the defendant for doing this to her daughter. And but she's called the police, and the police of that particular city are able to pull over, say, go home. And so she turns around, and by the time she gets back to the corner store to pick up her daughter, grandma is already at the corner store. Not only is grandma at the corner store, but the local police are at the corner store. They were only about 2 minutes away. Grandma's only about 2 minutes away. And so the local police, according to our timeline, got there just very shortly after grandma got there. Now, the little girl is in grandma's car. And grandma's asking the little girl questions like, where did this happen? Things like that. But this triggers an entire chain of events, like another sexual assault nurse exam for the little girl, another interview at this local facility in Jefferson County, But in spite of that, mom is still contacting the defendant, and he would ignore her sometimes. Mom will sometimes get mad, but they're still having sex. Mom and the defendant are still having sex, even with these allegations. And this is the interview at the local facility that interviews sexual assault victims. That happens like a month later for some reason. It doesn't happen exactly on that date in August that the little girl made her outcry. And so that happens in September. And then the very next month, the defendant, he's gone. He leaves to go to Las Vegas. Apparently he's got a free trip to Las Vegas because he and the mom like to gamble some, and he's won a free trip, so he goes to Vegas. But he outstays his, and not as welcome, but he overstays his trip, and he doesn't have any money. He doesn't have a truck because it has been wrecked. That's why mom was giving him a ride, and he stays in Las Vegas for like 6 weeks until he's finally arrested. Now, we don't know what he was arrested for. Does that have anything to do with this case? We don't know. We don't know. Maybe it was public drunkenness or vagrancy, or maybe he assaulted a little girl in Las Vegas. We don't know. We don't know why he was arrested, but he is arrested. And the defense wanted to bring his phone records into evidence, but that was squashed for some reason. But we are able to deduce, based on the testimony of the defendant and the testimony of the mom, that the mom was in contact with the defendant while he was in Las Vegas. They were still having, text messages back and forth and phone calls back and forth and saying, I love each other and all that kind of good stuff. Because mom's in a precarious situation. Now, I got to hand it to mom. She's in I think she's got a bad picker. And that's okay, because I've had a bad picker too. But mom's got this, she's in love with the defendant, right? And so she's in love with her daughter as well. She believes her daughter, something happened, but she just cannot bring herself to say, yep, it was the defendant that did this to my daughter. She just can't bring herself to do that. So she believes both of them. And, she saw the defendant a week after her daughter made this outcry. Now, he suggested that it was because, and when she saw him, he was angry that she had reported him. So he knew about it, even though in his testimony he said, I didn't know that this was going on. I didn't know that I was, that there was a real case or anything going on. And, but she's still wanting to be in a relationship with him. And he suggested that the little girl, the complainant, was just mad because he had moved out. And this was the little girl's way of getting back at him to make this accusation. And, the mom just could not believe, though, that the defendant could do it, though. So the defendant is in Vegas for about 6 weeks or so. He's arrested while he's there. We don't know the details of that. The defendant said that during all this time, mom was texting him, asking him to come home. She's sending him money. We can assume that they're, doing explicit things on the phone. We don't know for sure, but, you can kind of assume that since they've had a sexual relationship. And eventually he's arrested. Now, we don't know why he's arrested. And we have mom is going to have an aha moment where she realizes, I think my daughter's telling the truth. And that aha moment is when there is urine on the bathroom floor, and she's kind of accusing the little girl of the urine on the bathroom floor, and the little girl says, I don't pee like a boy, Mom. And Mom says, well, how do you know how a boy pees? And she says, Mike. And that was enough time has gone by for the defendant to be out of the house. Remember, he moved out in August. So she hasn't seen him since August. September, October, November, December, we don't know how many months it is that she no longer is calling him dad or daddy. And that's really about the timeline that we have. Sometime after this, we have the DNA getting collected from the defendant and his son, going and being analyzed on the panties from 2018 that were collected, and there being 140 times more likelihood that it was the defendant than anybody else, any random person. And so we went over that. And then we invited the people who were not sure, the people who actually were sure that the defendant was not guilty, to, go on ahead and let us know what the holes are in the argument. Why are you saying that the defendant is not guilty? Surely, there's got to be a reason, because we're asked to, find him guilty unless beyond a reasonable doubt. So if there's a reasonable doubt, you need to have reasons. And so they did come up with reasons, and I'm going to share the reasons with you that they came up with, why they did not believe They believe the defendant's testimony more than the complainant's testimony. There just wasn't enough evidence for them. And so they just we had the timeline up on the board, and they just poked holes in the timeline. So some of the things that they said were, the only time that mom brought up the black eye was while she was at the corner station. And that's not exactly true. Mom said she had the black eye while she was, that's one of the reasons why she was asking her daughter if it was okay for the defendant to watch her. So, but anyway, that was one of the holes that they talked about. The police were called for an unattended child at the corner store. Was she really unattended? Who called the police? Who called Grandma? And of course, that was given in the mom's testimony that she did those. When Grandma was on the stand, if the attorney, the comment was made, well, if the attorney asked me questions, I would say that he hurt my granddaughter, ! And I wouldn't have cared what the attorney said about it. I would make sure that everybody knows, hey, that man hurt my granddaughter, or whatever. And who knows what went on in the bedroom of the defendant's son when he was accused. That case with the defendant's son got dismissed. There was a reason for that. Why weren't we able to see the two interviews for that local agency here in Jefferson County, Texas, from the 2018 interviews? Why weren't we able to see those? Why weren't we given CPS reports and CPS interviews and things like that? They brought up that the little girl, the complainant, was living with 4 boys while in Orange, Texas. And the 4 boys would have a browsing history, and they were probably looking at pornography, and that's probably where the little girl was exposed to all of these sexual things. They said, what's going on with the little girl's brother? Why was he not questioned? Why wasn't he on the witness stand? And the other thing was the older brother was sharing a room with the little girl while in Jefferson County, Texas. We pointed out that there was a partition up, but that's from the cousin's testimony. So nobody questioned the older brother. And so why weren't we made aware of any questioning, and why wasn't he on the witness stand? The little girl was in the midst of a lot of turmoil from 2018 all the way through 2021, lots of turmoil. And in spite of that, mom just assumed that the defendant's son was guilty. Why did the defendant stay in Orange County? Why did he stay there? that was a hole in the prosecution's case, they thought. When the defendant moved to Jefferson County, Texas, there should have been some type of outcry. The little girl should have cried out and said, "I don't want him being here." The little girl would have had a behavior change. That's what the three people who said that he was not guilty said, that she would have had a behavioral change. There has to be some type of a clue that these things were going on with her. Why would mom ask the little girl if it was okay for the defendant to babysit her, basically? They said moms don't ask. They just say who's going to watch her. What are mom's hours? I mean, why is the defendant having to come and watch the little girl? And they pointed out that, hey, the cousin was with the older brother too. Maybe the older brother had friends that were coming over to visit as well. And they said that the little cousin could not identify the defendant while she was in the courtroom. The point was made when they were going through why they couldn't give a guilty verdict, that you are going to hear or see something. You absolutely will hear or see something if something of this magnitude is going on, and that the defendant should have left if he was falsely accused, and that the defendant is not smart, but he's not stupid. And so if anyone has, we got into a point where, has anyone had a physical assault exam and how intrusive that is, and sometimes the results of those are not accurate. The person who's doing the assaulting is not, who's been assaulted is not believed. They said that the nurse reports are hard to believe. Hard to believe. They said that, how much weight do you give to the examines, the SANE exams, the interviewers, the testimony of the little girl, and the testimony of the defendant? That was one of the questions that was asked to them, and they really couldn't answer how much weight to give. Another hole that they said that was in the case was there would have been something off. Somebody would have been able to tell that something was going on. There would be some type of behavior change. And they just cannot believe that mom is so oblivious as to not notice something. They cannot believe that grandma is so oblivious that she wouldn't notice something. And they cannot believe that the older brother was so oblivious that he didn't notice anything. And after the medical exam and the interview at that agency here in Jefferson County, Texas, the little girl has to know that something is off. She has to know that something is not normal. And so she would make some type of outcry. She would make it known what happened to her. They made this point. They said that after you come in contact with people asking you so many questions, you have to know that something is off, something is wrong. And then they said, why is mommy having people ask me questions? Why is mommy having people look at me at the doctor's office when I'm not sick? So they're saying that the little girl knew that something was not right. And so because she knows that something is not right, she should have been able to convey some information. Mom should have been worried and not let the little girl stay with the defendant. And it didn't even seem like grandma believed the little girl. That's what the jurors thought, that grandma didn't seem like she even believed the little girl. Mom was feeding info to the little girl, telling her what to say. And why, between grandma and CPS and the interviews, is the little girl getting no follow-up care if something really happened. If something really happened, there would have been follow-up care. And when asked about the DNA report that said, hey, you know, this is the possibility that the defendant is the likely contributor to the DNA. It said something like he's 140 times likely to be a possible contributor to the DNA. That they said if it says the word possible, it's junk. Anytime something just says possible, it's junk. And that the interview with the lady who, or the witness testimony from the lady who did the interview at the local facility here in Jefferson County, Texas, she came in with no notes, didn't have a briefcase, didn't have a file, anything, and all she did was share the procedures of how to do the exam. And so we the rest of the jury kind of went through those, and we talked about those holes in the case, and I thought we did a pretty good job of pointing out that those are not holes in the case. The only time Mom brought up the black eye was at the filling station. That's not true. Police were called for an unattended child at Cornerstone. So what? That doesn't make any bit of difference to the case as to why the police were called to come to that corner store. It doesn't matter who called the police, whether it was grandma or the defendant or the clerk at the store. That really doesn't matter. When grandma was on the stand, she is keeping her composure, and she doesn't need to say that man raped my granddaughter. She doesn't need to say that. Let me clarify that these are not things that were said in the jury room to these other jurors. These were my thoughts going through my head. I didn't. Apparently, some of the jurors that had this dissenting view of not guilty felt like they were being picked on, and so we kind of went out of our way today to let them have as much room to talk as possible and not try to correct them on the fly. Not that they, I have to say this, that they genuinely thought the defendant was not guilty. They genuinely believed that his testimony was credible and the little girl's testimony was not credible. And so they believed in their heart of hearts that he was not guilty. And I've got to hand it to them. They stood on their convictions. And that's what you're supposed to do as a juror, I believe. You can't just throw up your hands and say, well, everybody else says he's guilty, so I'm going to also, because I don't want, the stigma of having a hung jury or something. So, initially they did just hold to their guns and say, look, this is what I believe. You might not like my reasons, but this is why I believe it. And so they gave us the list of reasons why they believe that. And as I go through these, I'll tell you my response to that list of reasons, because this is my YouTube channel. I'll tell you what I think. So, and some of these were said out loud also after we had this list from them. Grandma doesn't need to say he did that to my granddaughter in order to be credible. Who knows what went on with the defendant's son? The little girl does, and she said so in her testimony at that facility in Jefferson County and during the nurse's exam, and we know what she said in the nurse's exam. So the little girl said what happened with the defendant's son. If that case got dismissed, that case got dismissed. They didn't have DNA evidence connecting the defendant's son to that case, so okay, there's not enough evidence. Why don't we have the interviews from that facility in Jefferson County, Texas, 2 interviews from November and December of 2018? I don't know. It just wasn't brought into evidence. Why don't we have anything from Child Protective Services? Don't know. But just because we don't have the evidence doesn't mean we can't look at the evidence that we do have. So what if the four boys have a browsing history of looking at pornography? They're boys, and they're probably not going to share that with the little girl who's only 5 years old. So, that's not going to give the little girl more information to talk about. What's going on with the little girl's brother? What is going on with the little girl's brother? Are you accusing him of doing something? If so, you need to say something, because your job is not, this is not CSI Beaumont, right? This is not 48 Hours Beaumont where you get to break the case and say, oh, it was really so-and-so. It's not how it works. You work on the evidence given to you. His name was only mentioned a couple of times because he was her older brother, and he was never a suspect. So why even bring his name up? Because, and if he wasn't questioned, so what? If he wasn't questioned, maybe he didn't have any additional information. Maybe he was just as oblivious as everything happening as mom was. So why do you need to see his testimony if he's not going to help in the case? So yes, he was sharing a room with the little girl in Jefferson County, Texas, but they had a partition up so that they were separate from each other. And you don't know if anybody questioned him or not, so you can't say that nobody questioned him. The little girl was in the midst of turmoil, and mom just assumed that it was the defendant's son from this 2018 thing. Yeah. If I walked into a room, if I had to bust down a door because my granddaughter was in there, and the teenage boy that was in there wouldn't open the door, and she was only 5 years old, and I busted down the door and I see him sitting in a chair with a blanket on his lap, and she's laying on the bed. Yep, I would assume some stuff. I definitely would assume several things. So why did the defendant stay in Orange when mom moved? Why did he stay in Orange? Don't know. Maybe maybe he was having some financial problems, and maybe it was easier to stay in Orange, Texas, than to commute back and forth to Jefferson County, Texas, and that's why he stayed there. Maybe it was because he had better child care access there or something. We don't know. You can't just guess and say, well, because I don't know, I can't give a guilty verdict. When the defendant moved, there's got to be some type of outcry. No, there doesn't. No, there doesn't. There are so many sexual abuse cases in the United States today that nobody knows about it until the person says something when they're in their 40s or 50s. You have no idea who's being abused. There is not always some telltale sign. And there doesn't have to be a clue. That's TV thinking, that there's got to be a clue. No, there doesn't. When the point of mom doesn't ask a little girl if she wants so-and-so, a defendant, to be the babysitter, yeah, you do. Lots of people ask their children if they want such and such a babysitter to come and babysit them. Of course they do. What are mom's hours? It doesn't matter what mom's hours are, in my opinion. Maybe out of all of the questions, that would be the one that I would like the answers for the most, to see just exactly how often mom was utilizing child care by the defendant because she was not available. But you've got the little girl's testimony, and so I guess that might have lent some credence to the little girl's testimony, saying, yep, here are the hours that mom worked, that shows that she had to have childcare this amount of time. When was the little girl alone with the defendant? Well, I'll tell you when she was alone with him. She was alone with him in the woods when he raped her. She was alone with him in his truck when he raped her, when they were on errands. He was alone with her when they went to the storage house and he raped her. He was alone with her when they were in that other city in Texas where they were staying in a hotel, and mom stayed in the hotel and he took her out in the truck and raped her. He was alone with her when he took her to the empty house in Orange County and raped her. He was alone with her several times. And even if it's only those 4, 5, 6 times, that's enough. That's enough, isn't it? Does it need to be more than that? I don't think so. Then they brought up that the little cousin was with the older brother as well. And what are you implying by that? He had friends. Okay. Are you saying that a sexual assault happened and it was one of them? Are you pointing the finger at someone else rather than the guy who actually has people saying he did that to me? You would rather point a finger at someone else? That doesn't make sense to me. And then the way that the little cousin broke down on the witness stand and cried, that indicated that, she wasn't telling the truth. I think that's not accurate. The little cousin not being able to identify the defendant in the courtroom, I think that's okay as well. I remember being a young kid playing Little League Baseball. My coach always wore a hat. Always wore a hat. Every time I saw him. For the entire season, I was very good friends with his son. And like 2 years later, they came to visit me. And the son had grown, like 1.5 feet. He was, like 9 feet tall. It looked like he was very tall. But there was his dad without a baseball hat on, bald. And I'd only ever seen him with a baseball hat on. I had no idea he was bald. I couldn't have picked them out in a lineup if you'd have paid me $1 million to. I had no idea who these two people were standing in front of me at my front door when they came to visit, just kind of unexpected. And so it's been a couple of years since the little cousin has seen the defendant. We don't know if the defendant wore a baseball hat all the time. We don't know if the defendant was only, 130 pounds at the time, and now he weighs 200. I don't know how much weight he weighs now. But we don't know if he had facial hair at the time, and now he doesn't. We don't know if he had dyed his hair blonde at the time, and now it's not. We don't know what the defendant looked like then versus what he looks like now. I think what would have been a good thing to do now that the prosecution knows that the little girl doesn't know what he looks like is hold up a photo of when the defendant was booked and say, is this the photo of the defendant? And yep, that's what he looked like. Yep. Okay. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the little girl just identified a photo of the defendant, and this is the defendant at the table right there. You can do that or something. I don't know what else to do, but that wasn't an issue for me. And then they brought up again, you're going to see something, you're going to hear something. Not necessarily. Lots of people go their whole lives and never tell a soul that they've been abused. Their whole life, and never tell a soul that they've been abused. They said that the defendant should have left if he was falsely accused. Well, if he should have left if he was falsely accused and then he didn't, aren't you kind of contradicting yourself? The point is that if the defendant is guilty, if he is, and I'm not saying whether he is or not, but if he is guilty, he's a narcissist. Only a narcissist would put their sexual needs above a little girl's innocence. And if he is a narcissist, and that is what every child molester is, they're a narcissist, then they've got this heightened sense of self-worth, of self-value, that they're more important than everyone else, that their needs are more important than everyone else. And they think that they can get away with everything. And so the defendant should have left if falsely accused. He doesn't need to leave. He thinks he can get away with it if he's a narcissist, right? So that's if the defendant is guilty, then he is a narcissist. I'm making that comparison. I'm not saying the defendant's a narcissist just because he's on trial or something, but if he raped little girls, he's a narcissist. And if you rape little girls and you're a narcissist, those are some of the things that a narcissist would do. They're going to think they're not going to be found out in a lie. They're going to think they can control people. They're going to think that they can manipulate people. They're going to think that they can say and do whatever they want, and everybody has to bow to their needs because they're the ones in control. They're the ones who are smarter than everyone else. He said that the nurse reports are hard to believe. The nurse reports are hard to believe because you don't want the corroborating evidence for the little girl's testimony. That's what I think. That makes them hard to believe. And am I saying that the jurors who are saying that they're hard to believe are just hard-headed and throwing out evidence? No, I really believe that they thought about this case and they just couldn't come to a conclusion. Because they couldn't come to a conclusion of guilty, they're going to go with not guilty, or maybe they did come to the conclusion this guy just didn't do it. And if you already say the guy just didn't do it, I believe that he did not do it. He is totally innocent. Then any evidence given to you is just going to be not believable, right? If you've already got it in your head that he hasn't done it, you're not going to be able to believe any evidence. And if you're just on the fence, if you're just doubting, and it's been this way for 2 days that you're in the minority and everyone is looking at you, are you going to change your mind? Are you going to look at things the way we're looking at it? You kind of dig your heels in sometimes. And that's okay. I mean, if you truly believe in your convictions that he's not guilty, stick with that. But I think that that's one of the reasons why they didn't believe the nurse reports. How much weight do you give everything? Unless the defense has debunked the evidence, you give it the full weight that it should have, right? Unless the defense can take a witness and nullify what they say, you need to assume that the witness is telling the truth, right? So, and if there's no evidence to the contrary, then you really don't have a reason not to believe a witness. And then again, they went through the thing of something's got to be off. Somebody has to be able to tell what's going on. There has to be some type of a change. No, there doesn't. No, there doesn't. They can't believe that mom and grandma and the older brother were so oblivious that they didn't catch anything. Well, you know what? We have a world full of oblivious people, I guess, because most of the time people don't get caught. After the exams, the little girl would know that something was off. Okay, maybe she does. Maybe she does. It doesn't change the fact that, her testimony is what it is. After you come in contact with people asking you questions, you're going to know something is off. Well, maybe so. Maybe so. That doesn't change the little girl's testimony. Why is mommy having people ask me these questions? Why is mommy having people look at me in a medical exam when I'm not sick? Maybe, she's going to know that something's up, and that's okay. It doesn't change her testimony at all. In my opinion, this next one is one of the most interesting questions, because it says that the little girl knows that something is wrong because she reported it, and she should have reported that dad was touching her too. So basically, this is, in my opinion, blaming the victim because she didn't report it sooner. They're saying that, hey, 2018, she reported it, so she knows if something happens, someone puts their hand between your legs, you things are going to happen. The defendant's son moved out because of what you said, so, you're an important person, so why didn't you report that the defendant was doing it? This one upset me. but I held my tongue. So anyway, it says that mom should have been worried and not let the little girl, the little complainant, stay with the defendant. Yeah, I agree. But she did. We can't have a case based on should-haves and could-haves and would-haves. What was right was not done, right? So it is what it is, and you have to take the facts the way they're presented and make your decision. It didn't seem like Grandma believed the little girl. I didn't see that in Grandma's testimony at all. Mom was feeding info to the little girl about what to say and how to say it. There's no proof of that at all. Mom asked if anything happened. Did mom coach her and say, okay, this is what I want you to do when you talk about being in the woods? You need to talk about your knees being muddy. You need to talk about being cold. Okay, this is what you talk about when it's in the truck. That would be demonic. I don't think mom would do that. Why, between Grandma and Child Protective Services and the interview at that facility here in Jefferson County, Texas, is the little girl not getting any follow-up and help? I don't know. In fact, she might have gotten follow-up and help, and it just wasn't presented as testimony. Is her getting follow-up and help going to make you believe her more? So, and if the report says possible, it's junk, the DNA report. My contention was that every report is going to say possible. If a man spits in a cup and he gives it to be DNA sampled and it comes back miraculously 30 seconds later, it's going to say you are 99.99999% the possible person that gave the sample. It always says possible. That's what I believe. And then the lady who represented the facility here in Jefferson County, Texas, who took the witness stand on behalf of that facility, she didn't have any notes. She didn't have any briefcase, no folder, no clipboard, no nothing. Just came with her cell phone. That's it. So what? So what? She was able to answer every single question about the interview that she gave with the little girl. When she was asked about the interview in 2018, that's not an interview that she did, either interview in 2018. And so you're asking about the interviews in 2018. Yeah, she watched those interviews a couple of days ago, but those weren't her interviews. I would feel very uncomfortable myself talking about someone else's interview when I wasn't the one doing the interview. So I don't know if that should have been objected to. You know, she's not an expert on that interview. She watched it, but you know that information is, she's not the expert in that, right? Are you wanting her to just read the transcript? So anyway, those were the issues. So it came time for us to vote, and in spite of all of our discussions, the vote remained at 9 guilty and 3 not guilty. So we sent a note to the judge saying that's, we're at a deadlock. 5 o'clock came, and we're asked to leave the jury deliberation room. And the judge says, okay, so I appreciate everyone, being here and everything, but we're going to have to declare a mistrial. And so that was the final decision for this court case, a mistrial. And but stay tuned, because in the next video, I will talk to you a little bit about some of the discussion that we had with the judge and the two attorneys after the trial. And stay tuned with that. My name is bobbaulch with That's Jesus channel. This video, again, is just one in a series of videos on this case. Check out the description for the other videos. And this is the That's Jesus channel. We're trying to give a Christian outlook on on this trial and how I reacted to it, and tried to be a good example in it. And I hope I did okay. Again, thank you so much for tuning in all the way to the end. Sorry to disappoint you if you were wanting a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict, but we'll see in the next video what might come in the future. My name is Bob Balch. Have a great day and be blessed.